Welcome to The Growth Kit, a podcast where science and actionable advice intersect to help you live a better life.
Hey everyone, Brian Comley here. Welcome to the Growth Kit podcast and a rare episode where I'm using my actual voice instead of a voiceover. So today I'm joined by Emily Churkin. Emily is a former teacher, a Screentime consultant, advocate, and the author of The Screentime Solution, a judgment-free guide to becoming a tech-intentional family. Today on the show, Emily unpacks the alarming statistics of screen time use and the consequences, why screen time use today is much different than it was a generation ago, suggested guidelines for screen use, considerations before giving your child a device, why parental controls and apps aren't the answer, tech intentional strategies, displacement theory, phubbing, my biggest pet peeve, and much more. Listening back to this episode, I felt a little uneasy after I recorded it because I realized I laid out too much of what I have figured out and not enough of my own daily struggles with screen time that probably so many of you also deal with. So whether it's too much screen time use in our household in general, my own phone habits in front of my kids, or even relying on screens as a temporary babysitter, it's a constant balancing act for me. In the interview and the book itself, I came to realize that screen time decisions will never be easy, but now I have a new perspective and approach to how to deal with them. So as always, please leave a review and share this with a friend who you might think could benefit. So thank you and enjoy. Hey, Emily Churkin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You are a screen time consultant. You help parents manage their kids' screen time, but you're also an educator and activist, and you're helping to address the issues with screens today. So let's start there. What give us these stats? How many hours, how much screen time? What are the issues today in terms of how much use kids are getting from screens?
Right. We used to talk about sort of like teenagers, right? I'd hear a lot from high schools and parents of teenagers about how much screen time kids were having after school. Now we're talking 30% of 8-year-olds have their own smartphone. We're talking the average hours per day for 8 to 18-year-olds is 7.5 hours a day on screens outside of school time. And if you think about the total number of hours in a day and the school hours, adding 7.5 to that means there's not a lot of time for anything else. So it's a problem that's accelerated pretty rapidly, I would argue, in the last 5 years, but especially the last 10 years.
Wow. So they're getting that much screen time that early. How early are kids getting screens, whether it's tablets or phones or just exposure to screens in general then?
Yeah, I mean, frighteningly, infancy. You can see babies in strollers or car seats, walking around with mom or dad's iPhone in their hand. And again, I think it's one of those things that I always like to go back to like when the iPad first came out, and you can actually go and look on YouTube and watch like when they first released it. And I think it was in 2011, maybe it was 2010, but they're talking about it as an adult tool, right? Like it's for adult use. This is just a great way to interact with technology in a new way. No mention of children. And that was less than 15 years ago, right? And now what we see is just a huge shift in what is being offered to kids, whether it's the quote unquote educational apps or games, the rubber pads that you put around an iPad so that when you hand it to your toddler, they don't break it. None of that existed when it first came out. And that wasn't the original intent. So I even gave it as a gift to my husband, right? Like that, we had little kids at the time and that was for him, not for them.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. So I guess the numbers are startling, but I guess the reason they're startling is more so because of potential consequences. Otherwise, it's a non-factor. So talk about some of the main consequences with the increased screen use with young people.
Sure. So, I mean, it's one of those things where anyone who's been paying attention over the last 10 or so years has had concerns about the impact of excessive screen use on children. And I always like to say, I'm not anti-tech, I'm tech intentional. So I really think there is a place for technology. I think that children should have some exposure to it. But the way in which it is currently happening is not at all in alignment with development, best practices, et cetera. It used to be, is this causation? Is this correlation? Is it just that we're connecting two things that aren't related? I think there is now enough research to say that there is a direct correlation between early childhood screen use and later academic problems, social challenges, emotional well-being. And, certainly anecdotally, we hear from parents and teachers all the time that that's very much what's happening. And so, my feeling when I talk about being tech intentional, my sort of TLDR, if you were to break it down into 3 parts, it's later is better, less is more, relationships and skills before screens. And unfortunately, that's not what's happening. We're seeing kids getting it younger and younger for longer and longer. We're putting screens before relationships, screens before skills. And I will specify, I see there are sort of 2 very parallel and distinct problems, but they influence each other. And that is the use of screens personally, for entertainment, whether it's our parents' devices or a personal device, and then the use of screens in school, which has really ramped up from, 0 to 100 in less than 10 years, it feels like. In terms of the personal one-to-one programs, they're called, where every child gets an iPad or a computer. And, again, it used to be that was like a high school thing. We're talking kindergartners getting iPads through school. So it's very different than it used to be.
And in your book, you talked about something called displacement theory. So can you explain what this is and how we can use this as a framework for understanding the cost and the benefits of these screens?
Yeah, Dr. Doug Gentile coined this term, and now sometimes people might refer to it as like opportunity costs, right? So it's really kind of a simple idea. It's just time that you spend on screens is time that you're not spending doing other things, right? So, we think about teenagers on their phones at night. What is being displaced? Usually it's sleep, right? And that's a pretty normal teen thing, is like teens stay up too late and they have a hard time getting up in the morning. And yet they are in childhood, that's like one of the most important things that kids could do is get good quality sleep, right? And so the displacement of sleep then has a negative impact on other things, like their ability to focus in class, their patience level with their family, like all of the ripple effects. I always say sleep is the low-hanging fruit. It's like if we can at least start there, prioritizing sleep. So that would be another way of thinking about displacement is if parents often get into conflicts with kids about screen time. You're doing it too much. Take it away. Stop doing it now. But if we shifted the conversation to more like, you need good sleep for your brain and your body, like that's just a basic biological need. What's getting in the way of you getting good sleep? So how can we create opportunities for more sleep rather than how do we decrease your screen time, right? It's just a reframing of that. But I think it just helps. When you look at 24 hours in a day, and if kids are in school, 6 hours and on screen 7.5, what's left? Not a lot of time. So that's a starting point. Yeah.
Right. So, and often you'll hear from the parents providing the screens. It's, well, I watched a lot of TV when I was growing up. I played a lot of video games.
Yeah.
I turned out fine. But
oh my gosh.
in your book, you have this really interesting comparison between different generations. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. And, I'm Gen X solidly, but I hear a lot from millennial parents. And there's some newer, different challenges for millennial parents. But I think one of the biggest differences is that, even if we grew up, whether it was millennial or Gen X, watching TV or playing video games, the biggest difference between previous generations and today is something called persuasive design. And it's the combination of technology and psychological manipulation, really, to get us to stay on longer. So, back in the day, if I wanted to watch cartoons, I basically had to wait till the weekend. It was like, that's when Saturday morning cartoons came on. Or if I had an episodic show that I liked, I had to wait a whole week to see the next episode. There was no such thing as like binging and, watching a whole season in one night and, the delayed gratification, right? And video games weren't connected to the internet. If I wanted to play video games with a friend, they had to physically come over to my house, sit next to me and play the game, right? That is so different. And we know that now, thanks to the internet, that we can, again, it's not all bad, right? It is cool that, my son could play video games with his cousin in California, right? Because they can be online and talking to each other while they play. But the problem is that the design element of social media, online games, video games, is the way in which it keeps you wanting to play more is very, very different, or the way that we have bottomless feed, in our social media like when you scroll till the end, there's no bottom, right? That's a form of persuasive design. And so it makes it very, very difficult Well, let's talk about adults. How hard is it for adults not to click? Well, and in fact, that's another persuasive design technique, right? Instead of clicking play next episode, we just autoplay now into the next episode of a season. That's a very intentional design choice. If it's hard for us as adults and we have fully formed brains, there is no way that we can expect children to manage or self-regulate their screen time, especially when their neural pathways are being manipulated. So that to me is a very important part for parents to understand. I always say it's not your fault, but it's our responsibility to understand this because it's not a fair fight. It's not you versus your child. It's you versus a hijacked neural pathway. You'll never beat the dopamine.
Right. And speaking of the dopamine, man, I always joke with my friends. We grew up at the perfect time. We had like you were saying, the cartoons on Saturday and Sunday morning. We had TGIF, we had Blockbuster, but all these things you had to anticipate and get excited about, and that's where that dopamine kicks in.
Totally.
And we always wanted more, but like Groundhog Day or repeating anything, there's that hedonic treadmill, and it's a lot, and then you kind of go down that cycle, and you get stuck, and it's tough to come back out.
Yes, and I think the amount of effort that went into those experiences too is really important when we think about like friction. Like friction is good. Like to go get in the car, drive to the video store, pick the video, you had to negotiate with your siblings. Like there was a lot of skill building actually in that. And now what can we do? We can literally just come home, pull up our individual tablets or iPads or computers, watch whatever we want by ourselves. I'm not sure that's a good thing. I think it's convenient. Certainly that's the argument, is it's so easy. I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to do anything. But I would argue there's benefit to some of the like moments of tension and conflict and effort that go into those experiences that make them a special, anticipated, fun thing, as opposed to it's just what we do all the time now.
Yeah, absolutely. In your book, you talk about, the surveys of parents, and quoting here, but it's 56% of parents feel they spend too much time on their phones themselves. 2/3 admit to feeling distracted by their device when they're engaging with their children, and 68% of American parents say their phones interfere with their ability to spend quality of time with their children.
Yeah.
So given all of that, why do you think parents are providing screens so early?
That's a great question. I think those numbers are probably higher now, even though when I wrote them a couple of years ago, that I think there is a combination of misunderstanding, misinformation, like not really understanding the impact of doing that. I think there is a huge cultural pressure. I think there's a lot of this feeling of like, well, everyone else is doing it, so I don't want my kid to be left out. I also think parents feel guilty about their own screen use. Like they're aware that it's kind of hypocritical of me to be like, no, you can't have a phone, but I'm on my phone all the time. And sadly, I think at the end of the day, the kids are the ones who are most negatively impacted by that. And so it does require some, humility on behalf of parents to be like, well, just because I can, or just because everybody else is doing it, doesn't mean that's actually what's best for kids, and I'm careful to be, I hold parents, again, parents have a responsibility here. I also really want to make a point that the technology companies go to great lengths to make you as a parent feel inadequate, or like it's your fault that you're not successfully, parenting in the digital age. And, to understand that FOMO, that fear of missing out, is a very developmentally normal experience for children, especially those middle school years. It's like, well, if everybody else has got that same cool pair of sneakers, you want that. That's not new, that feeling. But a pair of shoes is very different than a Snapchat account. It's like, it's easier to say no to the shoes. And you could say no to the shoes, and I guess your kid could go and try and buy them with their own money or steal them or something, but you'd notice it, right? Whereas like Snapchat, you could say no to, but they're going to download it anyway, or they're going to look at it on a friend's phone, or they're going to get it on their school computer. So it's like, it's a very different way of parenting, and it makes it much harder, I think.
Yeah. Long-term speaking, what I see is you're right. It's really avoiding that discomfort, any type of discomfort for parents. At least in my peer groups, it's okay, I need to do laundry, so I'm going to not prevent, but I'm going to give them this tablet so I can go do this. If I know a tantrum's coming, all right, here's the tablet. Let's prevent this. There's a long car ride. You're going to get bored. Here's the tablet. But for
Yeah.
ourselves too, when's the last time anyone was actually like truly bored? As,
Yes.
as soon as you get like the inkling that you're going to be bored, all right,
Yeah.
let me go to Snapchat. Let
Yeah.
me go to Instagram, TikTok. All right, you avoid that discomfort and
Exactly.
short-term gain, great, but
Yep.
long-term issues and dependence are incredibly apparent. And then, okay, that happened, but reversing that becomes infinitely more difficult.
Exactly. And I think we're seeing that come in the form of the mental health crisis among young people, that a lot of and I want to be clear, it's not just technology, it's not just social media. That is a huge part of it. But when you look at sort of how young people have been parented too over the last generation or two, we've sort of gone from this like helicopter parent where you swoop in and rescue your kid to lawnmower parent, which is this like you go ahead of your child and mow away these obstacles so they don't experience adversity or struggle. And I see a parallel with the way in which we give screens to prevent boredom, or we're going to a restaurant, I don't want misbehavior. But actually, by doing that, we are taking away opportunities where kids would learn the skills of coping with boredom, or what does it mean to behave in public, or how do you interact with grandma when you go to visit, or what do you do in a car ride without a screen? I mean, those are actually skills. And when we take away the opportunity to build those skills, it is no surprise to me that when those children become teenagers, they feel adrift. They don't know how to handle all of the new feelings that come with being an adolescent. And those are big feelings. That's a scary time in life. And so if you've spent your childhood being protected and rescued and sheltered and, lawn mowed, obstacles away, you are not equipped to deal with the real world. So it's much easier then again, right? The self-fulfilling prophecy to turn back to the digital one. And that's worrisome to me from a future workforce, civic institutions and democracy standpoint. Like what's going to happen in the future when you have young people who don't believe in their own ability, are so afraid to leave their house, feel completely paralyzed when confronted with conflict. Like those are really, really big issues that we need to talk about, and why it's so important when our kids are younger to give them those opportunities to practice the skills.
Absolutely. I love that. So as a screen time consultant, then you are constantly fielding a lot of these questions and these issues. So what are the most common things you hear from parents, and what regrets do they have?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get two questions almost all the time, which is how much screen time is too much and what parental controls do I recommend? And I am going to invite anyone who is thinking those questions to think of it in a different way. So let me explain why. So when we talk about how much is too much, I gave you the stat, 7.5 hours a day. The problem is it's not all screen time is created equal. So it's like, 7.5 hours of TikTok is very different than 7.5 hours of watching a science documentary or FaceTiming with grandma. So when we talk about a total number, I would first want to know, well, what is that number being filled with, right? Like that's the first question. So to go for quality over quantity rather than a total number of hours. The second question of what parental controls do you recommend? It's, to me, the fact that I'm asked that all the time suggests that there isn't an easy fix, because I wouldn't get asked it if it worked. And I actually am maybe a little bit of an outlier in my field on this, because I find the parental control thing a complete red herring. I think content moderation isn't going to solve the problem. I think parental controls are using technology to solve a problem technology created. I think a lot of times parents feel this, well, if I just have this app or this thing, I can just check that box and I'm good to go. My kid's safe. And I will tell you that every single parent I've talked to who hires me as a coach, or, whether I'm going to schools to talk, has a workaround story. I had this and my kid found that, or I did that and my kid still did this. So the two questions I would encourage parents to ask instead are, do I actually know what my child's doing online? And you're not going to know that by monitoring. You're not going to know that because you're surveilling them. You're going to know that because you've asked them, you've sat next to them, you've gone through their device with them. Or if you are a parent who says to your kid, I'm going to look at what your phone says and what you're doing on it, because I believe in being transparent about that. You have a really good idea. And kids are super savvy. They're going to sneak things. They're going to find workarounds. Like you might block all the apps you don't want them to have. Pinterest is a backdoor to TikTok, right? Like if your kid has Pinterest, they're watching TikTok videos. You know, it's like we cannot be fooled by this idea that like, oh, we just block it and I call it digital whack-a-mole, right? You think you've blocked one thing, it's just going to pop up somewhere else. And then the second question is, and it's related to the first question, is do you have a good relationship with your kid? In order to know what they're doing online, you have to have a good relationship with them. And if your relationship, and I hear this from so many parents, is just completely fraught and full of tension because of screen time, that is the long-term protective part of this that is so important. I would do whatever it takes to repair the relationship before you even address the screen time. And I talk about this in the book a bit about going backward to go forward, because sometimes it might mean you have to sit with your kid and play Minecraft with them, even if you hate Minecraft, or, you know, if you have to ask them about like, tell me about these YouTubers that you like to follow, and you actually go and watch some of those videos. Like, you have to understand that in order to talk to them about why it's not in alignment with your values or why it's not good for kids. But you can't just come at it with, this is bad, stupid, wrong, you know, I'm going to ban it. That's you're driving them underground to go sneak it elsewhere, because they will, you know, and again, it's that dopamine. It's so hard to resist that. We can't be shocked when they do.
Right, right. And all this is, well, not leading to, but the peak of this is that is addiction.
Yes.
And beyond just like the relationship conflict with parent and child, it's the relationship with the person and their devices. And you've highlighted this anecdotal experience of this, I think it's a teenage boy who was so addicted that he put his phone into a plastic bag so he could use it in the shower.
Yes.
Like that is
yes.
a golden behind story of addiction. But what are some of the other signs and symptoms or of addiction and just problematic use in general?
Yeah. And again, you know, I always clarify I'm not a licensed mental health professional, so I can't diagnose and treat. I have in my book a list of the problematic use metrics. And it is just, it's kind of obvious in terms of, is it impacting the quality of your life? Is it impacting the relationships you have? Is it something that you're spending time in at the expense of everything else, right? So those are the sort of red flags where it's not just sometimes, you know, it's kind of interesting because I feel like I end up getting parents who are on both extremes, the ones who've just like the kids are so addicted and embedded in, you know, like the screen time is so deeply entrenched. I wish those parents reached out more. And then I get parents who are like worried about what's coming, and they're so terrified because they've heard all these horror stories that they're afraid that their kid can't even look at a phone or they're going to like become addicted. And it's almost like I need to just sort of have them meet each other in the middle, because again, it's like, right. I don't think either end of that is necessarily a long-term solution that's sustainable. There are some parents I wish cared a lot more, and there's some parents I wish cared about a slightly different version of it, right? Like going into it with fear is also not healthy, right? So it's that. And again, I think the other thing I would add is like every child is different, you know, even within the same family. I've worked with so many families with multiple siblings, and one kid's fine. One kid can handle it. One kid can have some social media accounts or play video games and just not be affected. But the other kid is completely derailed by it, right? And so it's like, that's why, again, it's not a one size fits all response. It becomes so much about how well do you know what they're doing online? What kind of a relationship do you have with them? And what are those protective factors? And again, the relationship piece is huge.
Right, right. Yeah, right now my kids are 5 and almost 3 years old. So I'm at the very forefront of that. But I think I fall on the one end of the spectrum where I'm just kind of fearful of that.
Yeah.
For the smartphone and that piece where it's, I don't know, it's less of it's going to hurt our relationship, or maybe I'm scared of just what's going to happen to my kids. But fortunately, right. my wife being a psychologist and me being, I guess, just well read on the topic, we have a good system in place and good relationship of what we do. And we have one screen, we have one TV in the house, and we don't do any work in front of the kids. Our phones go away and we walk in the house, and kids don't even know, like, literally how to use our phone or password or anything like that. But I can see that so many issues when the parents do not have a cohesive game plan, philosophy, ground rules, core values for that type of thing.
Yeah.
And in reading your book, you listed out all these core values, and I went through and I highlighted which ones really appeal to me.
Awesome.
And I talked to my wife about it, and they appeal to her. So we're fortunate in that respect. But in terms of parents who may not be on the same page, what are some recommendations you might have?
Yeah, that's a great point because I get a lot of parents who are like, well, I feel this way, but I have a spouse who thinks differently or isn't as worried as I am. Again, I think the key is finding common ground. I always talk about 80-20, right? Like 80% of the time we're parenting within our values, we're saying the things we want to say, we're going to mess up. And that's okay. In fact, that's even healthy for our kids to see. And you know what you're talking about too, about where the phones go and you don't work in front of your kids and you have one TV. That's intentional, you know, and I talk a lot about this tech intentionality. And a big part of that is modeling. What we do as parents, you want to know what your kids are going to grow up and do with their phones. It's what you're doing with your phone. So are you taking your phone in your room at night? You know, it's like when they're little, they may not notice. But I'll tell you when they're 13 and they're like, well, that's not fair. You've had your phone in your room for the last 10 years. Why do I have to put my phone in the kitchen? So like that to me is a super easy starting point. Phones out of the bedroom. You know, the other thing is, again, this is a real nuanced thing I've been thinking about a lot, which is that there's a difference between internet connected screen time and non-internet connected screen time. And we often don't think of them as separate things anymore because it's so interconnected. But I actually think family movies or, you know, family TV shows that are developmentally appropriate, right, for different ages can be a wonderful way to spend time together. And if you're doing it like on an old school DVD or even on a, you know, where you've purchased the video online, right? Like it's something more intentional can be a great way of sharing a screen-based experience. I know families that do video games together too. But if you're also in a position where like a young child wants to play on a phone or an iPad, again, finding the longer form content, the slower paced content, the non-algorithmically driven, like little kids on YouTube, not good because the algorithm feeds you so quickly. And I think may have written about this in the book, but like my own son, when he was 4, loved trains and Legos, like many 4-year-olds. And he wanted to watch Lego train videos. And so we pulled it up on YouTube. We were sitting with him doing this. And he's 16 now. So this is over 10 years ago. And the Lego trains are circling the track. And he's like, yeah, that's so cute, so cool. And he's like, I want to see them crash. So then, of course, he wanted to see the Lego trains crash. So we typed in Lego train crash. And then the next video that popped up just dropped the word Lego. So we see a giant train in the real world crashing, which is a very shocking difference. And all it did was it just dropped the word Lego and fed us this other content based on our previous search. Again, this is 10 plus years ago. So the algorithm is only better, sharper, faster, stronger now. And so that was an aha moment to me of like how quickly something can go from cute and innocent to really terrifying. And that happens all the time for children online today. And it does happen at school. I mean, I think that's the other part of this is like parents assume because kids are on devices at school that it's safe, they're locked down, they're protected. I would say as long as they're connected to the internet, they won't be. And it doesn't matter if you have the best IT guy in the country. It's just not possible. It is not possible to block everything. And kids find the workarounds. So, you know, I would love to see more intentional tech use at school. For the time being, what I'm advocating to parents, especially of younger, under 5th grade, even under 8th grade, is to refuse the school tech. That's a little bit of my troublemaking that I'm advocating for. Say no. There is no developmental benefit. There is no research that isn't industry funded that says a kindergartner needs an iPad to learn. If anything, it is harmful, detrimental, and an impediment to meaningful learning. And so I think parents are going to have to refuse that until more intentional use comes back. That's my hope.
And what you read about the book is also you heard parents say, never say, I wish I gave my child a smartphone or a tablet earlier. And that's how I think that was sometimes with my kids. Like whatever they do, whatever job they choose, wherever they live, for the rest of their life, they're going to be on whatever device that is. And I am probably doing them no service of introducing it earlier or more frequently than they need to be on it.
Exactly. And you think about it from the skills and the critical thinking and all that brain development that we want to leave space for, that is not going to come from being on a screen more. I hear that a lot. Like, well, what if my kid wants to be in technology, when he grows up? Well, fine. Then they should be outside looking at how the world works so that when they want to build a technological tool, they understand it. And I think we just are so misguided in thinking that our kids need it at a young age. Like, think about the technology you used in elementary school. How much of it is still applicable today? I mean, I look at that and I laugh. It's totally different, totally different. And if anything, the upside of all the technology we have now is that it's super easy to use, intuitive, user-friendly, so easy. So children can thrive without it. And then when they get introduced to it, they're not going to take long to learn it, right? And I think that's an important thing for us to remember. It doesn't mean we shouldn't expose them to cool things that technology can do either. I think there's like with robotics or, sound design or graphics, like there's some very cool things that technology allows. I think within the context of a technology curriculum or a computer lab program, absolutely we should introduce it to kids. But why are we giving iPads to kindergartners to learn how to read? That is, again, detrimental, harmful, not research supported. Schools don't have computer labs anymore because they assume that all the kids have their own devices. My daughter's middle school doesn't have library computers because they assume all the kids have devices. But a library is the one place where I would want a teacher supervising kids using devices so that they could learn things like research, citation, mis and disinformation, typing. The number of kids who get given devices at school and do not know how to type is mind-boggling to me. Why would you give a kid? Yeah. And so that's what I mean when I say skills before screens. Ed tech, educational technology, which is sort of the buzzword of like all of this stuff in school now, is not the same as tech ed, technology education. I believe that we should have technology education, but we don't need one-to-one devices that are internet connected to do that. We can still teach kids typing. You can use a typewriter to teach typing. You don't have to do it on an internet connected computer. You can teach how to do good research, how to do citations from a book on a piece of paper. You don't need the internet to do that. And so none of that is what's currently happening. I mean, that's kind of what I see as the madness of ed tech. It's all or nothing right now. And I want there to be a middle path, and I'm not seeing that happening yet. I mean, I feel like it's coming, and I'm certainly fighting for that. But there's a lot of work to both inform and educate and also push back on an industry that has a very, very, slushy marketing budget. It's like they're just throwing money at schools and saying, oh, you have 34 kids in your English class. Let us help you differentiate with this app. Wouldn't it be great if you could monitor all your kids' screens from your computer? I mean, as a former teacher, that sounds like a nightmare to me. That's the last thing I would want to do. But that's where we are. Yeah.
I go back to my alma mater, University of Scranton, every year, and I teach a seminar. And when I first went in, this was 15 years ago, like day one, it was everyone with their notepad out, everyone was writing down notes. And then slowly over the past 15 years, 100%.
Yep.
Not laptops, but not only that, it was interesting to see there was no discussions before class. Yep. There was no awkward conversations. There was it was less interaction, not only with each other, with their peers, but with the teacher.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just one thing, but it's really, really interesting to see that transition. That on top of like, you see, like we talked about before, the tech neck, the decreased ability to regulate their emotions when they got not positive feedback. Things like that. This is not a slant on the millennials or different generations.
No.
Just an observation.
It is. And there's actually plenty of research about handwriting notes versus typing notes. If you wanted to learn something deeply, you need to handwrite it. And unfortunately, and I totally see this too. I was guest lecturing at the University of Washington here a couple weeks ago, and 150 people in the class, 150 of them had their laptops out, and it's like, I get it. It's more convenient to have your notes in one place, but it's not better for learning. It's not for deep learning, right? It's for there's a difference between information and knowledge, right? Like, I think that's what's really lost in this. Yeah, I can get any kind of information I want right now at the click of a, button because of the internet. But that doesn't mean I have accumulated knowledge. Knowledge is making meaning of that information. And that's actually all brain development stuff. Like that, we need time. We need to talk to people. We need to ask questions. We need to hear what other people's ideas are. And, we're displacing, back to our displacement comment, we're displacing opportunities for that in higher ed too, and that's deeply worrisome. Again, there's going to be plenty of time for our kids to grow up and sit at cubicles and be on a computer for the rest of their adult lives. We should protect childhood even more now by minimizing that as much as possible.
And one of the strategies you write about is living your life out loud. I really like this. I started doing it with my kids, and I think it helps just rationalize it. But I also I've noticed as I do it, I get more annoyed when people don't do it.
Yes.
Back to me, and it's my pet peeve of is just growing. So can you talk about that? What's living your life out loud?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite parenting. Well, it's not just for parents. Anyone can do it, right? And it just means narrating what you do as you do it. Anytime you reach for your phone or computer or device, so it's like, oh, I'm reaching for my phone. I'm going to check the weather, see if I need a coat today. And then I'm going to see what the maps say for traffic. So you're giving your kids and yourself both accountability for how you're using it, but also explaining the tool side of this. It could also be, I'm in line at the grocery store and I'm bored and I'm pulling up Instagram and oh my gosh, I'm just scrolling and I don't feel better. And I could have been talking to the person in line next to me. The idea being, again, to your point, that you start to be more aware of your own use. And my husband did this too. And he said he came home and he's like, now no one else is doing it. And it feels so weird because I'm like, why are you all just looking at your phone and not saying what you're doing? Live your life out loud. So I would love to see that spreading, right? That adults are taking that awareness and bringing it to, again, just to say out loud. It's a little bit like, if you write down what you eat, you pay more attention to what you eat. So I think of it as like, that's the starting point. We just bring awareness to how we're using it, how often we reach for it, the reasons we're reaching for it. Plus, for our children, like all they see is the back of the device. We could be writing our dissertation or scrolling through TikTok. They have no idea what we're doing on there. And if we can start to help show them that I always say that this is a Swiss Army knife, not a switchblade, right? It's like a multi-tool. That will help them understand as they get older that we use it for different reasons at different times, and it makes us feel different ways. I think that's actually really, really important, especially because we know they're going to be exposed to it.
Yeah. The other thing is social etiquette. If someone is having a conversation with you and their watch buzzes and they look at it, what they're looking at, that notification is immediately more important than that conversation, whatever words or eye contact was being shared. And I heard someone say either give 100% or 0%.
Yes.
So I started to do that as well, where, okay, I will live my life out loud. I'm sorry this occurred.
Exactly.
Blah, 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 rationalizing it. But if I need to take it, I call or whatever that is, you step away. I'm sorry, right now this is more important. I promise you I'll come back.
Yeah,
I started doing it. That's my kids too. Instead of just like being right in front of them and not paying attention when I need to do something. It's okay. This is really helping me bring this to the forefront.
Yes, that's exactly it. Actually, it was my husband who was like, the problem with texting, if you're talking to your kid and your phone pings and you look down, which is called phubbing, right? Phone plus snubbing, that the problem is what we're doing is we're giving someone who's not even in the room the power to interrupt us. And you think about your child standing there right in front of you, or even an adult friend or, relative, we're allowing someone who's physically not in the space to take our attention away, which is not a good feeling. Adults don't like it. So again, to your point, like, it's okay to be like, I'm so sorry. This is important. I have to take this. I hear you're asking me my question. I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to give you my full attention. That's all we have to do. It's okay to say that I've got to go and deal with this, but it's when we pretend that we're listening and like do the thing where you've lost them. And that's what feels so rude and disrespectful. I hope. I feel like we're getting pretty normalized to that, which isn't great.
Right. Yeah. So for the parents who have kids who are they're in it, they're towards that dependence side of it, what are some of the What are tips? What are tips you have for those types of situations?
Yeah. And I hear a lot from these parents. I think, again, starting with our own use of phones is a powerful starting point, because we can say to our kids, hey, this is impacting us. It's impacting our relationship. It's impacting my life. And so I am going to start to pay attention. I'm going to live my life out loud. I'm moving my phone from my bedroom into the kitchen. I've been making choices that I think are not great for me. I would also like to talk to you about them. What do you notice? I always talk about replacing judgment with curiosity. I think especially teenagers feel judged and criticized all the time, right? Their defenses are up immediately. If we can approach it with a genuine sense of curiosity and leave the judgment out, that's a starting point. So like I said, tell me about why you like this YouTuber, or, what is it that you spend most of your time doing on your phone? Like, how do you feel when you're done? What is it that you enjoy about it? Try to approach it with a neutral lens at first. And then think of it as side by side parenting instead of, head to head, right? Like, because it's so easy to be combative with our kids, especially our teenagers. It's like, how can I help you? How can I support you in reaching your goals? Like, if they have life goals or college goals or sports goals, like, what are the things that are important to them? How can I help you reach those? And how does your choices, whether that's sleep or diet or phones or, whatever, interfere with that? Because I want to help you find success in the future. I want to help you feel good about your life. How can I help you? Now, it's hard. I'm not going to lie, like, especially with the teenagers who are so deeply embedded. But I will tell you this, like, I was just talking to a 14-year-old the other day, a friend of my child's, and she's like, honestly, I wish smartphones had never been invented. I would be so much happier if no one had them. And I hear this over and over again. And, there is research too that, like, kids will say, I don't want to give up my phone unless everyone else does. And that's that collective action piece, that it's like, that's why I think sometimes parents have to buck the trend and say, no, we're not doing this, because it's going to give other parents courage to say no too, and then maybe other kids to start, right? Again, I hope that pendulum will swing back. So, again, if you can do it with your kid as opposed to in conflict with your kid, that's certainly the goal. Is it challenging? Absolutely. But I think it's the fight worth having.
Well, Emily, this is great. Is there anything I haven't hit? Anything else that you want to say? Any closing thoughts?
Well, I write weekly essays on this topic that I post to my blog. But if people are interested in learning more, kind of, especially lately, I've been writing a lot about the school piece. I highly recommend signing up for my newsletter. I don't spam people. I don't sell email addresses. It's just literally my weekly essays. So that's a great way to kind of keep tabs on what I'm doing and some of the topics that I'm writing about, especially with schools. So I would just point people there.
All right, Emily Tverkin, thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning into the Growth Kit podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. You can check out my website at MindBodyDad.com and subscribe for more weekly insights sent to your inbox. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter at MindBodyDad. Many of the links I share are affiliate links, which means I earn a small commission if you purchase through them. This doesn't affect the price you pay, but it helps support the podcast. In some cases, I may even be able to provide unique discounts for you. I only recommend products and resources that I genuinely believe in and use myself. My top priority is to provide practical ways to help you live better, and I wouldn't link to anything that doesn't align with that goal. Thanks for your support.